We're going to give you guys a little preview of the next 5-weight shootout, because we're going to come up, we're going to have this shootout pretty quick now in the next month or so. But we've got what we feel are maybe the 4 best rounds. So we're out here, it's a very windy day. We're just going to take a few shots out here today and do some casting, but it's tough to show you anything on the video because we can't see the line in the air against the grass. So we're just doing what we can, do our best. So I've got the Hardy Zenith, and this just bombs them in there at 50 feet. This is unbelievable, just very accurate, and just by far the best feel of all the rods. In this wind you can do plenty with it too. I wish we could show you how tight the loops are, but it'll bang them right in there. Okay, so now we're going to give this new Hardy Artisan a try. This also has a pretty darn nice feel, and it's smooth, very smooth. It's a little softer in action than the Zenith, but it has nice line control. It's got a nice fairly fast action, but it's just a slightly bit slower in action and a little bit softer than the Zenith. So for a lot of people, I think this is going to be a very nice rod. Look at that, just popped it right into the plate there at 50 feet. But has a lot of feel. You know, in my hand I can really feel the tip, so the overall feel is excellent. You know, even better than the Zenith. The third up, Orvis Helios 2. Now Orvis is making some darn good rods. I have to admit, I'm really it made the final cut, and it's a pretty darn nice rod. It's very light in weight. It's probably the lightest overall weight. But then when I get it in my hand out here, it's heavier swing weight wise. There's no question it's a little heavier in my hand, and I've got to work a little harder to get the job done. It also has a slightly stiffer tip. If you can see the way the rod bends, I'm going to just wave the rod sideways. See, it's got a little bit slower action, more of a moderate action. Even though this is their tip flex model, it's a little slower in action than both of the Hardy rods. But that being said, it casts very nice. Again, 50 feet, it feels very nicely balanced with a GPX 5-weight, and it's good and accurate. Not as good as the 2 Hardy rods, I don't think. Not quite as good. I don't have the confidence to actually get that super accurate shot every time. But if the wind isn't blowing, it pops them right in there. Look at that one, it's right in the plate, in our little pie plate at 50 feet. That one was too. So it's an impressive rod. You know, we think it's craftsmanship is great, good looking rod, and Orvis is really doing a good job. Well, the final rod to make the cut is the new Sage Circa. And this is a very interesting rod. You know, we tried the Sage 1, but the Sage 1 is the 5-weight is way too stiff, and it's just not that great a 5-weight. You can read about that on the main shootout. But the Circa, if you're looking for a neat 5-weight rod, this is the way to think about this. If you like to fish in close and you want to, you're doing a lot of your fishing at 25, 30, 35 feet, this is I think a really good choice. It certainly casts better than any of the rods in close, in tight. It's got a really nice feel. It's very light in weight. The profile of the rod's very small diameter. So they're using some of the the top technology to build these rods. It's a very pleasant rod. It's got a nice, smooth, almost like a half well style grip, but it's almost a pretty straight grip. But it's small diameter, and on a rod like this, it feels really good in my hand. Now, when we're throwing this in close, it's very nice, at 25 feet. But now around here, it's trying to throw it at 50 feet in the wind, and 50 feet in the wind is another proposition. It'll do it if it's not too windy and you don't have too many gusts to contend with. It does a good job, and it has great feel too. It's not as good as the other 3 rods at this distance. It just is not designed to be thrown this far. If I back it off and start casting 25, 35 feet, it feels like $1,000,000. But out here at 50 feet and farther, that's really starting to push the range, and it's just not as good as the best 5/8 at this distance. But in close, it's a terrific rod. It's really light in my hand, very nice light swing weight, and I like it. I mean, you know, most people most of the time you're fishing 25, 35 feet away, not 50, 60 feet, so you might really consider this one. And you know, the downside, if you're out on a really windy day or whatnot, it's going to be tough. You're going to have to switch rods. Okay, we're going to take a look at what these rods feel like in close at 25 feet. So here's the Hardy Zenith. It's pretty stiff, you know, stiffer, you know, at this range. Not as nice, not as much feel at this range as at the longer ranges, but it's still very light, very accurate. You know, it's got a nice soft tip, so I can cast very accurately with it in close. But it lacks a little bit of feel. You know, it's not quite as close. I can't rate it quite as highly. You know, it's not going to be a 98 out of 100. It might be a 95, but it's still has a good feel. Now we're going to try the Hardy Artisan. Again, we're going to be casting at 25 feet in close, and see what this rod feels like in tight. Now, to me, it has a wonderful feel in close. Really nice light tip, a lot of feel, and we knew that this slightly softer rod was going to help in terms of the accuracy and the feel in close, and it does. It feels lovely. It's sweet. It's still pretty accurate, but it may not have quite as much feel and touch as the Sage Circa, but it's certainly number 2, and it's got a very nice feel at 25 feet, very accurate. All of these rods are extremely accurate at 25 feet. It's not like any of them are inaccurate. It's just very subtle changes from one to the other. Yeah, but no, there's no question this is a really beautiful tool for, you know, that you know, 25, 30, 35, 40, 50 feet, those ranges. Now we're going to step it up to the Orvis, the Helios 2. We'll see what that feels like at 25 feet. It's a little heavier in my hand. Every time I pick it up, I can see the weight difference. And also, this rod has a stiffer tip. It doesn't bend quite as much in the tip. It doesn't have that nice progressive bend like some of these other rods do. You know, even though this is their tip flex, so it's supposed to be their fastest action, it's still not quite as fast as we'd like to see in terms of the way the tip bends, and that hinders it a little bit and at 25 feet, because I just don't have the lack of feel. You know, it casts okay, you know, and it's pretty accurate, but it is not, the difference between this rod and that Artisan is huge. I mean, you know, and the Zenith is better too. So at close range, this is probably the least effective of all 4 rods. Okay, now we got our Circa. This is where this baby is going to shine. This rod is great in close. It's got a nice soft action, and you've really got tremendous feel. And you can just, you know, just a little flick of your wrist, you can cast right off the tip of the rod. We get very nice, accurate presentations in close. It's tough out here with all this wind, but I mean, you know, we've cast this rod quite a bit on windless days, so we know what it'll do when there isn't much wind blowing. It just has a very, very nice feel, and it's very easy to cast. It's very light in my hand. You know, I think it's probably got the lightest swing weight of all 4 rods, so it's very easy to cast, and it has a great feel. And so for those shorter distances, 20, 25, 30 feet, I don't think you can beat this rod. It's just that if this kind of runs out of gas, when you get out there to 50 feet, then it starts running out of gas, and trying to reach any farther than that, like 70 feet, forget it. I mean, it'll do it on a big double haul, but you know, it's not going to do it. Well, you know, you're not going to be real pleased with what you're going to get at 70 feet with this rod. Now we're going to go deep. we're going to throw it 70 feet now. This is our max range in our test ropes, our 5-footers. For 5-weight rods, we figure it ought to be able to cast 70 feet and do a pretty good job with it. So we're going to see what happens. Here's the Hardy Zenith, 70 feet. Now I'm going to have to double haul a little bit, but not much. And it just, it powers them in there. It zings them in there. Nice tight loop all the way out, good accuracy. And we've got like a 20-mile-an-hour gusting side wind here, at least 25 miles an hour. It just has a lot of backbone, a lot of punch. And you can bang it in there and it's going to take off and go. Now we're going to try this Artisan. This is the rod that we like so much in close, but it actually feels pretty good out long too. So we're going to work at 70 feet on this baby and see what we get. Oh man, I got to strip some more line off it. That fired it out there pretty good for a softer rod than the Zenith. It really feels good, and when I lean on it, it takes off. I mean, it casts good. And it's not as good as the Zenith, but it's almost as good, you know. Again, this is at 70 feet. I got to double haul a little bit, but well, that's popping them right out there on the money. Next up, the Orvis Helios 2. Now this, actually at long range, this rod feels pretty good to me because it's a little stiffer in the tip. And it'll drive it good at long range. So this rod actually casts quite well at long range. It's got plenty of power, and it doesn't have the power like the Zenith does, but I mean it's better than the Artisan at this range for sure. You know, it feels pretty good and fairly accurate. It loads well, and now the factor they have a slightly stiffer tip is not hurting at all. Now it's helping us a little bit. Okay, here we go. Here's the Circa. We're going to see what this guy does long. You know, we've got the plate out there. The farthest plate's at 70 feet, and we'll see what this feels like at 70 feet. Well, it'll get it there. It's not like it won't get it there, but there's very little control. It's like, you know, it'll launch it. You know, if there's no wind, it'd be much better. It just doesn't have the ability to really pop it over and drive the loop hard in this kind of wind. So, I mean, it's certainly, you know, inferior to all the other rods. This is, at long range, this, you know, it's not designed for long range, number one, but at 70 feet, it's not going to cut it like the other rods do. And, you know, sure, a good caster, you're going to throw it 70 or 80 or 90 feet, but you're not going to be very happy. Well, there you have it. There's our little mini shootout. I hope gives you some ideas, and we for sure want you to keep tuned in and be watching for our full-blown 5-weight shootout. And then we're going to test about 20 rods, and you'll be able to read about all the different rods and where they finished and how good they were and whatnot. So, you know, there'll be some surprises in there too. We've got some good inexpensive rods that'll do very well, and then we've got some very expensive rods that are going to be pretty crappy. So you just have to tune in and see what we say. Well, in this early season, here we are, late January. There are always some perils you have to contend with out here on the lawn. And we found that the major one we have to contend with is not the wind at all, but this stuff. the deer droppings.